Like I said in the last hockey video I did, that sometimes some cities don't recover after losing their franchises and have never seen the light of day with a franchise. Hockey, of course, I talk about Hartford. I got to talk about Quebec City. Heck, I have to talk about Kansas City and to a lesser extent Phoenix, but then also Atlanta. Baseball, not many cities have lost a major league team and not got one back. I mean, Philly and Kansas City lost the A's, but they got teams back. Like Oakland's lost the A's now. They're in Sacramento. And of course, Montreal losing the team to Washington and not recovering with a franchise. Well, I mean, build a better ballpark. And football doesn't seem to have those franchise shifts that ruin a city forever. I mean, Baltimore, yeah, with the Colts moving to Indy, but they got the team back 12 years later through Cleveland, and Cleveland got their team back. So nothing to do with that other than Oakland. I mean, yeah, Oakland and San Diego. I guess I could say Oakland and San Diego have not recovered because they don't have teams anymore. But for basketball, not only has like Buffalo and San Diego had teams in the 70s and 80s, and Vancouver in the 90s, that they haven't had a team back. This city has, and you'd be shocked to know the lineage of this team runs through Kansas City. Yes, Kansas City has the Royals. Yes, Kansas City had the Scouts in hockey for a few years. Yes, they have the Kansas City Chiefs, but did you know Kansas City had an NBA team? Let's talk about the Kansas City Kings and their best chance to give Kansas City an NBA Finals appearance in 1981. We're playing basketball Sims. We're playing basketball Sims. He's playing What If NBA. Cutter's doing What If NBA. Yeah. Oh, all the teams around the world got to know that the Raptors are number one. But what about the Bulls, Wizards, and Pistons? They all have great what ifs. Stories about old teams like the Kansas City Kings and maybe even the Minneapolis Lakers. But we all know we're going to do some basketball. He's doing basketball. He's doing basketball. What ifs? Cutter's doing what if NBA? So what if NBA? So the story begins with the franchise known as the Kings being in Rochester. They were called the Rochester Royals in the and put into the NBA and all of that. So anyway, they did quite well in all of that. Rochester tried their best. They actually did win the NBA title for the Kings franchise in 1951 by defeating the Knicks. The only championship in the franchise's history. In fact, they're the longest serving team to not win a title. They have the longest title run in the NBA, akin to the Leafs in the NHL. The Royals couldn't do anything about it. They moved to the Rochester War Memorial Stadium in 1955, but not doing a lot of things. They wanted an all-star game there. The Royals were a losing team filled with rookies and couldn't have a profit. They did have some players who were future members of the Basketball Hall of Fame, but you know, they moved to Cincy, who was trying to get an NBA team, and Cincy loved it. They liked the Royals name because of them being known as the Queen City. They got Clyde Lovell and George King, Mo Starks, and Jack Twyman did their job. Unfortunately, in 1958, Mo Starks struck his head pursuing a rebound, and unfortunately, he had a seizure and was permanently hospitalized. Stokes looked pretty good, and since he just fell off of it, Jack Twyman actually legally adopted Stokes and all of that. And Twyman would help him until his death in 1970. So anyway, yeah, Twyman did stuff, and then Oscar Robertson, they managed to get him, and the Royals were much better in all of that. Cincinnati were a decent team and all that with the big O, but they couldn't get the home games they wanted. And Cincy was starting to lose faith in all that. Bob Cousy became the Cincy head coach and, traded away Mo Lucas and Oscar Robertson. And, they won the titles. They would decide to move to Kansas City and become the Kansas City Omaha Kings. The Cincy Royals couldn't be called the Kansas City Royals because the baseball team, so they called themselves the Kings. So they would split games evenly between Kansas City and Omaha. And it was kind of weird how Nebraska had a basketball team and all that. But in 1975, they decided to abandon Omaha and move strictly to Kansas City. They actually played games in St. Louis as well, instead of the Camper Arena. They had Tiny Archibald and all that. What was weird about the Kings was that on the back of their uniforms, they would have the number first, then the player's last name underneath, which was unusual. And all that. That was kind of weird and all that. But they still got everything going. So Kansas City had some decent teams and all that, including the 1981 squad. Yeah. So there was a lot of problems. The trouble with Kansas City is they lost their franchise mostly to a different sport. The major indoor soccer league, where everyone was watching the Kansas City Comets of indoor soccer more so than the basketball team. And it just looked bad. Kansas City had some problems and all that. They didn't like the Kings. They even were following the Jayhawks and the Tigers. Well, the Missouri Tigers more so. So they moved to Sacramento and all that. I'll talk more about and of course Sacramento. I think I talked about Sacramento. Yeah, I talked about the 2002 team that got screwed by the Lakers, but nevertheless, Sacramento got their team and has been around since. So yeah, I didn't want to cheat, but I can't talk about the Kansas City Kings. Anyhow, let's talk about the 1981 team. So the 1980-81 Kansas City Kings, it was their 32nd season as a franchise and their ninth in Kansas City. They won 40 games, lost 42. You're thinking, well, you're below 500, you should make the playoffs. But they did. In the 1980 draft, they took a couple of players that you really don't know about. In 1981, they had Otis Birdsong, pretty good reviews it. Leo Douglas, Phil Ford, a great player from North Carolina in the 70s. Gus Gerard, Ernie Grunfeld, who was decent for Tennessee. Reggie King, Sam Lacey from New Mexico State, the best New Mexico State player other than Pascal Spicy P. Siakam. John Lambert, Joe Merriweather, Frankie Sanders, Lloyd Walton, no relation to Bill. Scott Wedman, before he went to the Celtics. Jojo White, former Celtic, and Hawkeye Whitney. So they won 40 games. So the Spurs won the Midwest by 12 games and were the 2 seed in the West. Whereas, the Lakers probably would have been the 2 seed, but because San Antonio won their division and Phoenix were the best team in 1981. I didn't realize that. So 6 teams made the playoffs. The top 2 seeds would get a bye, and then the other 4 teams would have to face each other in the playoffs, I believe. Kansas City's 40 wins tied them with Houston and only one ahead of Golden State. In the playoffs, in the best of 3, they had to face the Trailblazers, right? Yeah, 3-6-4-5. So Kansas City took on Portland. And won game 1, lost game 2, but then in Portland, they won game 3 at the Memorial Coliseum. So they were going on the next round against the Phoenix Suns, and it looked like Phoenix was going to beat the tar out of these guys. Should have. Should have, would have, could have. But they were up 3-1. They took Phoenix downtown. So anyway, Phoenix made it 3-3, and then game 7, the Kings beat the Suns. In the Western Finals, they took on the Houston Rockets, who shocked the world. by going to the conference finals. Both Houston and Kansas City had 40 wins. And they got a tiebreak over Houston. That's why they got to be home court advantage. Unfortunately, they won game 2, but that was it. Houston won the next 3 and put the Kansas City Kings on ice. STS. Of course, let's talk about the 1981 playoffs. The bracket was like shocking. Chicago took care of New York in the first round. Philly took care of Indiana. Philly took on Milwaukee 3-2 and beat them in 7 games. Boston swept the Bulls. Boston then took care of Philly in 7 games. And Houston, as the 6th seed, took on the 5 seed Kansas City. Houston took care of the Lakers. Kansas City took care of Portland. Kansas City needed 7 games to get by Phoenix. Houston beat San Antonio in 7, the Battle of Texas. Houston beat Kansas City and made one of the best Cinderella runs, but Boston beat them in the finals. So yeah, that was crazy. Everything's crazy. So what would have happened if the Kansas City Kings got into the NBA Finals against Boston? Let's find out. So anyhow, we had the Kings and the Celtics facing each other. Phil Ford, Otis Bergman, Scott Whitman, Reggie King, Sam Lacey versus Tiny Archibald, Chris Ford, Larry Bird, Cornbread Maxwell, and Robert the Chief Parrish. So yeah, McHale was drafted, but he didn't start. They didn't trust him. Well, I wouldn't either. Game 1. So the Kings get their butts handed to them 103-125. Bird 24 points, 15 rebounds. So anyway, Wedman with 25 points, Birdsong with 21. King, Ford, and Lacey with double digits. Joe Merriweather, Ernie Grunfeld, Lloyd Walton, John Lambert, Hawk Whitney. JoJo White only played 1 minute. I think he was like a ghost. I think he was near the end of his career. 24 from Bird, Tiny 10, Ford 12, Parrish 17, Maxwell 11. Gerald Henderson, 16 points off the bench. Kevin McHale, 11 points and 21 minutes off the bench. Rick Roby, 20 minutes off the bench. ML Carr, 12 points in 19 minutes. Eric Fernston, Terry DeRod, and Wayne Cricklow. Afterthoughts. Game 2. So the Kings do a little better. Bird, 22 points, 13 rebounds. So Bird doing his job to take down the Kings. 23 from Wedman, 22 from Birdsong. The bench, not really much. JoJo White scored a bucket. The Celtics, 23 from Parrish, 22 for Bird. Parrish, Tiny, and Ford with 8 points each. Emil Carr and McHale, 13 points. Celtics, Kings. The Kings at home would lose to Larry Bird, 116-96. So the Kings are in deep trouble. Kings would be in deep trouble. Celtics up 3-0. Well, these Kansas City would host an NBA Finals game. Bird 22 points. Cornbread with 20. Pretty irritable. Yeah. Everyone off the bench did well. Kansas City 30 points for Birdsong. Whiteman and Ford did their job. JoJo White only played 4 minutes. JoJo. So the Celtics, I think, would sweep the Kings. And no, Sam Lacey remembered what he did, and the Celtics could not win game 4. They wanted the sweep, but the Kings prevented them from the sweep. 21 from Cornbread, 17 from Parrish. Bird only 13. That's unusual. 11 points from McHale. 25 from Birdsong, 20 from Ford. Merriweather, 14 points in 18 minutes. Lloyd Walton. Game 5. Kansas City would win again. Birdsong with 33 points. So Boston took their foot off the pedal, and Kansas City's put their foot on the pedal. Parrish, 21. Everyone got 14 points for Boston. Hi. 33 from Birdsong, 19 for Whitman. And the bench went wild. But they have to go back to Boston. And in Boston, somehow in the 4th quarter, they won the 4th quarter and won it. Sam Lacey with his 3 blocks, as Kansas City's now forced a game 6. What? Kansas City has forced a game 7, 26 from Birdsong, 16 from Merriweather on the bench. Sam Lacey. Yeah, so Merriweather did his job. And Kansas City's now one win away from putting up the reverse sweep on the Celtics. 25 from Bird, 14 from Parrish. So anyway, that's what he does. And then game 7 would go to the Celtics in triple overtime. Well, the Kings actually come back from 9 down to force overtime, but the Celtics win in triple overtime. Yeah, that's unrealistic. Boston won the title, sure, but the Kings were in triple overtime. So anyway, Birdsong played 53 minutes, Ford 51, King 50. Unfortunately, King and Wedman would foul out. Wedman with 30 points. Birdsong had 34, but yeah, Wedman fouled out. Merriweather played 19 minutes. The bench didn't play too badly. The Celtics, Bird and Parrish fouled out, but they had 38 and 41 points respectively. So Tiny played 51 minutes, Ford 48 minutes, Cedric 40. Emil Carr played 22 minutes on the bench, Rick Roby 19. So the Celtics would win the championship over the Kings. Well, the Kings forced game 7, and the Celtics had to use triple overtime magic to beat the Kings. So at least Kansas City can hang their heads saying that they only lost in 7. If only. Anyway, I'm Jeff Diamond. I do.